to the Piston Fanatic. I'm your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. I've also been the varsity basketball coach of a very successful program in northern Michigan. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. Immediately after tonight's game at Brooklyn, I'm going to do a podcast too, so please tune in for that. But we have breaking news, so I decided to come on because what we've been waiting for, Piston fans, team owner Tom Gores has finally spoken, and he spoke to, I think, a group of the beat writers, and he unlocked a whole lot of information. So let's get started, and he talked about changes, expectations, rotations, accountability, and again, every one of you listeners have been frustrated by the silence of the organization through all this losing streak, and it's a historical losing streak. So finally he spoke out, and so the big thing I'm going to get at right away is he said, what's for sure is that change is coming. We are not right now, and we have to add and we have to delete. We're on it already. And he's talked about how they've been on it for weeks, and they've been digging in and unpacking everything so that they can figure out a better way to go forward. He said, we don't really know exactly what we're going to do yet. Whether he's talking about trades and rotations and the relationship within the organization. And so it's going to be interesting to see what does happen. And again, I always talk about actions over words. We hear that from Monty, all the words, but the actions don't back up the words. So this is what we've been wanting to hear, Piston fans. We've been demanding that he speaks out, and he did. So first thing I want to talk about, though, is it's really fascinating to me that he has been talking to Monty about rotations. And he said, I normally don't ever do that, but I love it. I love that he's talking about him and holding him accountable for his rotations. And he's also said the number one thing to succeed going forward, we have to make sure that our young talent is protected. We have to make sure the young players feel encouraged. And if the young core is continue to improve, that will be our success. Well, that is not happening because, when he's taking players out of the lineup and in the lineup or not giving the young core minutes, then that's a problem. And so I'm happy that he did that. I do hear that everybody feels this way. I love the comments I get from my listeners. I have a lot of very intelligent listeners. So if you have never got on the chat with the listeners, you need to do that. There's also this on Facebook. There's a really cool it's called the Piston Forum. It's a group on Facebook, and they have some smart guys that have good discussions. So, but Keith Smith, there's this podcast called the Front Office Podcast and NBA Podcast, and it's really good. It has Trevor Lane and Keith Smith. They cover the NBA. They follow all the teams real closely. There's podcasts is a lot about the salary cap and transactions and trades and rumors and speculation and injuries. So they cover a lot of things, but somebody asked him a question about the Pistons, and he says, it would be great to be a Piston fan if you could just enjoy and watch these young players develop and play some exciting basketball and win some games here and there. But he said, but that's not happening. He said that, he's playing weird lineups. He said Monty's just not playing the kids. He's playing weird lineups. Sometimes they get minutes. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're out there and they make a mistake, and then they get pulled. He said it's just a mess. And so other people see it, and it's obvious. And then he also made one comment about if we're going to fire Troy, which a lot of you want to have happen. He said you need to do it before the trade deadline. Before he makes some desperation move like Van Gundy did with the Blake Griffin trade, and you don't want somebody doing that just so they don't lose their job. Another person, James Edwards III, he alluded to the fact that the handling of the players may have led to the group being spiritless. And I'm sure that he's talking about the handling of like Asor and especially Ivy. And, I love the movie Hoosiers. And in the movie, there's a scene at the end there. This little teeny school is playing against this enormous school, and this is a true story. And they get to the end of the game, and it's like a 1-point game, and the star player scored like a lot of points. But the coach says they're going to be looking for him to score the shot going up by him, and so he designs a play and uses the star player as a decoy. Well, all the players are just staring at him and blankly, and then finally the star player says, "I'll make it." And what when those players, they like, I think they're looking at Monty sometimes and thinking, what are you doing? And so I think that's what James Edwards is alluding to, he said. But Gore said, I actually talked to the players, and that's the interesting thing, that he's talked to individual players just the other day, and within all the losses, and to see how they're feeling, but he wants to encourage them and say that we still have a good future. He said, this set of players, and I know them individually, I saw them the other day, and we are in a great spot with our young talent. And he acknowledges the fact that they have great heart and great spirit, and they're fine young people, and how they've handled themselves during this losing streak. He said, we're also set up with a lot of cap space, and you guys know, and this is a big statement, I am willing to do whatever it takes for this organization to be successful. So he's acknowledging, for example, that he would go over the salary cap and spend money on free agency. He said the vision is blurred, that they had going into the season. They thought they were going to compete on a nightly basis, but he said he still feels like we have got ourselves in a good spot with flexibility, and we can be nimble, so we're not stuck. And again, I talked about this, about how there's teams like the Bulls. They got all these guys that are older, aged players that aren't getting it done. Well, actually, it's a crazy thing. So, a lot of you want Zach LaVine, and he's been rumored in trades all over the league. But you know what? He's been out. He's been injured, and the Bulls are doing better without him. So that's kind of depreciated his trade value. But we just don't want to be in a spot where we're stuck in the middle, and we're, like with Zach LaVine's contract, and then be where in the Raptors. They got these guys, they got like three good players, three of their best players are free agents at the end of the year, and they haven't traded them yet, and they haven't re-signed them. So what is going to happen there? And they're, again, these teams that are just out of the play-in or just in the play-in, that's no man's land. There's other teams, the Wizards and the Hornets, and those teams are there. But anyway, he said that that himself and Troy and Monty are doing a lot of reflecting, and the vision it still has to be executed. He said, it's not a dream. We still have the vision and the flexibility. Another great important statement, he says, I don't think there's any narrative at all that in terms of Monty, Troy, and all the stuff that he said, I'm all over them. I'm all over them, and I'm talking to them about every little thing. And so he said, they will tell you that too. He says they know it, and they would acknowledge that he has been on them. And there's a lot of accountability that needs to be held. And we've all wanted to hear that. There might be addition staff, and there might be deletions, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But again, the big thing is he's promised that there's going to be change, and that they're, not leaving any stone unturned. And so we'll see how it happens. Like I said, actions over words. That's what has to happen. And we have this big game tonight. And I just want to add this at the end of the podcast, that Kukahil, that does Unlock Pistons, and he does a good, he's been ranting a lot. He's been so upset and angry. And he said that as of 6:33 a.m., if the Pistons hadn't made any changes, then he was going to do something. I don't know what he was going to do. He's just a podcaster, but he was all fuming. He, like I said, he just rants for his whole podcast. But ironically, Koo made told them they had to do something, and evidently they heard him. So anyway, I think that's pretty funny. But I hope that this time of year, Christmas is coming. I hope that you celebrate with your family. And I know we get overreact to the Pistons because we're fanatics. And I love the fact, and Gores acknowledged that Piston fans, they care. There were almost all the seats filled at that game with the Jazz. And, they're not a great team. But it's just Piston fans, we get angry, and because we care, and we care about our teams. And even when they're doing bad, we care. And I appreciate that you even care about my podcast. And again, please subscribe. Be the reason that somebody feels cared for and loved. And let's go Pistons. Let's beat the Nets tonight and end the streak.